Hello and welcome to Open Pakistan webinar series. The Open Pakistan webinar series is an initiative of Open Program for Pakistan. These programs are fully funded by the Regional English Language Office, fellow at the US Embassy, Islamabad. These programs provide professional development opportunities to English language teachers and learners all across Pakistan. These programs include open global online courses, massive open online courses, webinar series, and then engaging our alumni into different productive activities. If you wish to stay updated about Velo Pakistan and its opportunities, you can visit www.facebook.com/velopakistan. Evolution is the local implementing partner in Pakistan. If you wish to stay updated about Open Program for Pakistan, you can visit www.evolution.com.pk/open programs. Under the Open Pakistan webinar series, today we are broadcasting our webinar 7.1, and the topic for the webinar is collaborative writing to enhance academic writing development through project work. The presenter for our today's topic is Mr. Adeel Khalid. Adeel Khalid teaches academic writing at Foreman Christian College, a chartered university. He is an open alumnus, has completed critical thinking skills in ESL, assessment, formative and summative practices in language teaching, advanced TESOL practitioner course, and integrated technology in language teaching. He is interested in language teacher education, narratology, English for specific purposes, innovative TESOL methods, and the role of culture in language teaching. In today's webinar, participants will be able to identify the changes, if any, in the formal aspects of language students have written when they develop academic writing through project work. Not only this, also identify features of collaboration that are recurring while writing, also describe the role of project work in the academic writing process. So without any delay, I would like to invite Mr. Adeel for presenting the webinar.
I'll be presenting on collaborative writing to enhance academic writing development through project work, how teachers can make use of technology in a better way to incorporate academic writing, collaborative academic writing skills into students, and what are the different ways. And I'll be sharing certain tips, and I'll be sharing my own experience of incorporating this collaborative writing task into my online digital pedagogy, and I would comment on how what was my experience doing this particular adopting this particular strategy into my context. And I will be encouraging all my fellow teachers to do the same, considering their ground realities, their context, their level of students, and they can of course adapt. So if we move on, what actually entails academic writing, and not just academic writing, but writing in general. So I pose certain questions that: have you watched someone making poetry, building a bird house, cooking a fancy meal? And doing all these things takes a lot of time, patience, and planning and concentration. So similar is the case with writing as well. Writing does not come at its own. We need to be a bit patient. We need to plan effectively. And then we need to teach these planning and these all these writing strategies to our students. We need to cascade them, to learn them, and to properly incorporate all these things into their writing so they could be better writers. What exactly is the plan? What does exactly the academic writing processes do offer? And if we talk about the relevant literature in Montero, it says that organizing, outlining, editing, drafts, and then reaching a consensus on the final product. So it's not just, since it's not just one person's effort, it's the whole group. So reaching on the final product is probably something that we do not witness into a normal writing. So one person is writing, so one person's strategy, one person's own opinion matters rather than the whole group's. But in this collaborative writing task, the whole group's reaching on a consensus is very important, and that is what should entail into writing processes. So academic writing encompasses a range of approaches, types of practice for it that requires various techniques to train student writers. So here you go with the collaborative writing task. When we talk about the final product, here we go with the academic writing that holds a whole type of practices that require various techniques to be trained through our students. So we talk about introduction. So in terms of that, what writing processes does have. So writing process has almost, we can divide it into 4 different stages. So one is the pre-writing, then the writing, and then revising, and then the publishing. Since we all know that publishing is part and parcel of effective writing, so that's the reason that we included pre-writing. We can say in pre-writing we brainstorm, then while writing, then revise. Whatever we revise, we need to edit it, we need to revise it, and then that goes to the publishing material. So collaborative writing task, collaborative writing means that the students team up. Team up is in the bold letter, which means that teams up is very important part. Um, uh, with one or more peers to go through the writing processes. And if we go through the literature, it points out that when students work together, they are dialoguing and they are making decisions due to constant feedback. So for constant feedback, who is giving them the constant feedback? That question might arise in your mind. So constant feedback, number one is the teacher, who is actually who actually has designed something for them, but they're also interacting with each other. They are receiving and giving feedback from each other as well. So if we talk about collaborative writing task, again, it refers to the same literature. I found this definition: joint production or the co-authoring of a text by 2 or more writers. Storch also points out that the defining trait of collaborative writing is the joint ownership of the document. And that is quite explicit in academic collaborative writing tasks, that whatever you produce, you need to take the ownership of the document produced. Here I am going to exhibit some of the instructional design topics, that the topics that you can incorporate, and later on the outcome, what should be the outcome. And these topics ranges from interdisciplinary approach to different subjects, and then the outcome, we can relate outcome with the academic writing task. For instance, in the number 1 is the dancing in health. If we talk about healthy activities, and we talk about the human organ, and we could relate it with biological sciences, and the outcome could be that they need to write an opinion composition about dancing benefits. So the number 1 there, so there you go with the interdisciplinary approach that we can always incorporate into writing classes. So when we talk about landmarks, natural, man-made solutions, and decisions making, and how we can incorporate into in the writing class, we can ask them to draft a tourist brochure. A brochure for tourists, highlighting all those essential landmarks, essential natural and man-made um, attraction for tourists, and then they can inform the intended audience that how and what benefit they could get by visiting that site. Number 3 is positive, negative aspect about movies. They can be asked to write a movie review. They can produce a movie review, a joint collaboration it might be. And number 4, if you're dealing with conflict and risk and peace and process, war and other related terms. For instance, if the students are from having a political science background, strategic studies background, they could be asked to writing a solution problem composition about something related to the topic. So there you go with the instructional design topics. And then I came up with certain outcomes, because when we talk about academic writing, we're dealing with students who are undergraduate students. And of course, you can, as I mentioned earlier, you can adapt to your students' needs. But if we talk about students who are coming from different backgrounds, having having different interests, so you can tailor and you can change the topics, and you can think about the outcome. And outcome is also very important, because in writings, we usually backward planning that really works. So we plan, we keep in mind the end in mind, and then we plan backwardly. So we think about the outcome, and then we can go back what actually includes. And so this gives you a better idea. So what collaborative writing tasks should entail, and why we need to do it? Because it encourages students to think higher order thinking, to encourage their thinking to give a thumbs up to more like ideas that includes synthesis, that includes creativity, that includes to analyzing something and not just remembering and keeping it at a superficial level. Division of labor, of course, everybody is has been assigned different roles, so there will be there's a collaborative effort, and I'll be talking about different roles into a later part of my presentation. But this is just for when it is a collaborative effort. So the labor has been divided, so the work has been divided, the effort has been multiplied, I would say. So division of labor is very important. A specialist or expertise based tasks. So when we, as I mentioned earlier, that the different interdisciplinary, I took certain topics and then the outcomes, and it's not just one field or one topic that you could focus on, rather across the globe you can range different topics, different subjects, and so on and so forth. Tips for collaborative writing tasks: set rules around access. It's very important in collaborative writing tasks that you assign your students the rules, tell them what to do, what not to do, and how to proper make use of this time and effort and energy and human resource that are being included, and how they need to value each other's opinion. So it's very important that you set rules right in your instructions, right at the start of your collaborative writing tasks. Map out your workflow. It's very important that, as I mentioned earlier, that backward planning that really works in writing processes, but especially for collaborative writing tasks, you need to map out your workflow. You need to know as a teacher that what exactly to include, when to include that intervention, and how to intervene and when to intervene. So that's very important, I think, as a teacher, because teachers' role in collaborative writing tasks, as per my opinion, actually it's double the effort. It's not just you assign the role and you forget, but rather you need to take an account, a serious account of all the track of time and track of their effort and track of their communication, and you need to constantly give feedback along as well. So pointer client size content wrangler, it's a little bit a trickier term that I use, because it clearly and cleanly refers to the application that you're using. For collaborative writing tasks, we are using different strategies, different techniques, online digital tools we'll be using. So any tool that you're using, you as a teacher, you should be aware of what content, how this site, basically how this application, if my students will be using this application, what facilities, what features, what specific features this site will be using, which with this site will be offering us in advance. So you should be very much clear about these things. So you should, as a client, of course, you will be a client if you're using Microsoft, you're a client of Microsoft. So you need to be very uh, um, abreast with latest techniques and latest if there are certain changes into their latest versions. You need to be educate yourself as teachers. Make use of comment function. Comment functions are very handy in collaborative writing tasks, and especially if we talk about Google Classroom, Google Doc. So document function actually can help in students to not just brainstorm, but also help teacher to give feedback. So these are certain, I think, tips that if teachers think about these things and start thinking about collaborative writing tasks, and these tips will definitely help them to to smooth this for help them to smooth this transition into collaborative writing tasks. So why collaboration in academic writing is important, that is what my next question is, because it aids in problem finding as well as problem solving. So not just problem finding, but also because many people are working on the same thing, so it rather gives multiple options to resolve the problem. Aids in learning abstractions, because writing itself includes a lot of abstractions, and sometimes if we talk about at a younger levels to students, it's very difficult for them, for teachers to give them certain to explain them certain aspect. For instance, if I give you example, the difference between noun and adjective, it at times it gets difficult for a language teacher to explain these abstractions, because grammar itself is full of different abstractions. So, but in collaborative writing tasks, And academic writing students can help themselves in understanding these intangible concepts. And teacher not necessarily all the time has to explain. So aids in assimilation and transfer, fosters interdisciplinary thinking, as I mentioned earlier in my topics, and I gave certain outcomes as well. It helps them to definitely encourages to think in a multiply in a different field in a married way of thinking. So and assimilation because they get to know each other, aids in keeping thinking deep and better understanding. So they do not just it's a superfluous I must say that not just a superfluous way of doing things, but rather a deep understanding of what to include, how to understand, how to help each other. And this understanding actually helps them to not just come up with a better writing draft, but also come up uh, with um, uh, with a better understanding about their surroundings as well. So leads to higher achievement, of course, when they there's a group of people. Group of people, they can synergize, they can celebrate their success as compared to one individual who is working very hard to reach to a conclusion. Prepares for the 21st century skills. And when we talk about 21st century skills, it includes the informers, the critical thinkers, the people who come up with different solutions for different problems, and they are innovative. So these things, I think, in collaborative writing tasks, we can expect students to prepare. And lastly, encourages active learning, combining reading, writing, thinking, note taking, communicating, conflict avoiding, and conflict resolving. So in so it encourages students to not just learn and understand their writing and reading skills, but they think differently. They start note taking everything. They communicate. They know how to actually to face a conflict, and then not just facing it, but how to avoid it. And then if it happens, then how to resolve it, because there's no other way. So this is, I think, this leads them to a holistic understanding of their environment, their peers, their own soft skills, as well as their mental capacity. How to consider this writing process more helpful? What are essential position we can I mean, what are different roles that we should be giving our students? For instance, we can divide our students accordingly. It's up to our teacher, whosoever has designed the task. I'm just giving a general description that the one person can be the drafter, the other person can be the reviewer, the third person can be the editor, and the fourth person can help them in publishing work. And similarly, you can add more roles as per your class size and your group size. For instance, one group that I really one role that I really appreciate, and it didn't include it, but I usually do it in with my classes. I make somebody a topic facilitator. So that topic facilitator actually researches for the entire group and provides all the information what should be including. And then I also ask one student to take the full take the step, and then take the role of the layout facilitator. So the layout facilitator actually makes sure that everything is in place, the thesis statement is there, the proper introduction is there, and then the supporting statement is there, and whatever the essential um, components that I designed for them. So these other roles you can think of if you think that they are considerable enough that to include. But these three, I think, basic very roles: drafter, reviewer, and editors, of course you can include them. If we move on with collaborative writing tasks, I give you this example is of my own class where I included um, where I included where I used Google Doc for my classes, and I asked them to involve me as well. And I asked them to involve me as well into that, add my email ID as well. So here I am with my own feedback where I used to intervene wherever it is necessary. And here I asked them to write a letter, compose a letter, and then there are different students who are part of it. And as I mentioned earlier, make use of this chat box that they do it. Um, um, and then they could clean it later on once they think that their draft has been finalized. So this is how it works. All right, G. If we move on to the next part, I usually ask in collaborative writing tasks to color code. And for yellow color coding, I say there's just the introduction. The turquoise color is for major claim of the author. And again, it is from one of my classes. And purple color is for evidences that they provide in order to substantiate their thesis statement. All parts of the paragraph graph are presented, and the one um, um, reason of asking them to do it because it's online. So I can conveniently I could ask them to do it because I think that as a teacher I can see whether all these 3 or 4 essential components in the relevant ratio or not, or if it's not, then why not. So I could actually see it from the first glance that I have. Already, advantages of collaborative writing tasks allows for, we already talked about higher order thinking, mimic a real life situation. So whatsoever they're facing, we can ask them. And then students learn time management, organizational skills. Students may feel less stressed and anxious, even though the exam is almost definitely more demanding intellectually than a proctored exam. So in online situations, this refers to online learning and online material types. If it's typed, so it's more convenient for teachers to actually mark it. And then, of course, they can upload it on Turnitin directly. If we talk about plagiarism check, so Turnitin is a software, as we all know, and especially all the university teachers have access to this software, so they can actually upload it on Turnitin. For that, teachers need to make their students um, accounts. All right, G. Challenges. There are certain challenges as well. Students may not be familiar with collaborative writing tasks. So this is probably a very first interaction of them to know what a collaborative writing task should work like or may work. So you need to be a bit patient with your students as well and give them clear instructions and guidelines. Students may have unequal access to referential material. So considering the fact that online digital technologies are not equally available, some are paid, some are not paid, and we do not have equal access of internet in certain areas. And I remember some of my students do not have internet facility at all. So we need to accommodate and we need to think about all these students and keeping in mind their required needs, and we need to know what challenges our students may face. May underestimate the amount of preparation needed. Do not do that because it requires, and do let them know that a lot of planning is required in collaborative writing tasks. Or may overuse referential material, need clear guidelines to avoid this. Again, increase workload for both students and instructors, because not just teachers, not just students who are actively involved, but also teachers who should actively involve. You can set a timeline for the students, like from this time to this time I'll be available online. You can ask me, you can contact me, and you can choose the platform, and or I'll be using the chat box, so I'll be responding all the queries. Rubrics can be more challenging for collaborative writing tasks. You need to make it more specific, and here I gave you the reference. It may, and notice it may be difficult to start assessing students differently than what they are used to if they have never taken such exams, or if suddenly we are giving them exams that require higher order, more research, and more reflection. So if we are using collaborative writing tasks, it might um, require them to behave differently, to think differently, and to move on in their lives differently. So guidance for students: tell students explicitly what kind of collaboration is permitted and what is not and use certain examples. Tell students what sources they may or may not consult during the exam, during the writing process. Tell students how to cite those sources. Finally, tell students all of this in writing and give them the writing instructions. And I took this from the Harvard University, and I adapted it, these guidelines for my writing students' writing classes. And also, time for peer evaluation is very important, because in the writing collaborative writing tasks, a one-on-one students interaction is going on. So it's very important that you the clarity of the criteria should be there, distinction between different levels should be there, reliability of scoring, as we mentioned, there are different types, there are different components, like reliability, validity, practicality. Well, and the teacher should be taken care of all these scoring related things and rubrics. And then support of metacognition and clarity of expectation and guidance of learners. Already some tools and applications for collaborative writing tasks that teachers might use it. And here you go with, there's a whole range of techniques that are available. You can use at your own convenience. You can select any one of this. Here you go with the famous Google Docs that everybody is using. I use it very frequently. Then IA Writer, then Etherpad, the Notion, Scrivener, Quip, Zoho, Dropbox. So there are different tools that one can use, and depending on what features every digital app or site offers, so you can have a look at it. So before you delve into any technology, you need to know that why using it, and what are different components that they offer. For instance, you need to know that whether it offers you instant chat messages or not, because in collaborative writing tasks it's very important. And then you need to know whether it's synchronic, it works in a synchronous mode of timing, or asynchronous. So it's very important as well. And then you need to know that whether the students could email drafts to each other or not. So, and then discussion boards, whether there are discussion boards are available or not. Then call in or WhatsApp. Then export privileges. What export privileges do they have? For instance, in Google Doc, the file could be exported into PDF or any other format. Even yeah, a Word document can be converted into a PowerPoint presentation. So these export privileges are very important. And then real-time sharing, as I mentioned earlier, synchronous, asynchronous. So these things are important before you select any technology for your class. What to look for in a collaborative writing task: simple sharing with collaborators, commenting on specific parts of the document, synchronous, confusion-free collaboration, editing and version control, exporting options, markdown support, and these are all things that I earlier mentioned in my previous slide. Theory and practice. So and then there is a difference between theory and practice. So teachers, to give clear instructions about the task, start with the brainstorming activities, followed by joint construction of an essay, then peer review activities. In the joint construction stage, students can check each other's draft paragraphs after joint discussion and plan the content for each paragraph. Practical consideration is the size of a group. So size of the group should not be larger or very small. So you need to be careful about the drafts. We can relate this component with the rules that I specifically mentioned earlier. All right, G, if we talk about collaborative writing activities, I gave you some of the examples. There is one, snowball writing, and how it works is that one student start the writing process for the time. So in a snowball writing, one student starts the writing process for a time period decided by the teacher. When time is up, the teacher tells students to crumple up their work into a snowball and throw it somewhere else in the room. So whosoever picks up is the next person. That person could collaborate with that person. So student retrieve one of the snowballs, smooth out of the paper, and continue the writing process. So there is my tip: have students use a pen to make the writing easier to read for the next students. So this collaborative writing is probably best for students who are in person, they are present in the class, but it might not work into online classes. But it can in terms of like if you, when you are assigning different roles, so you can work on that snowball writing process, and you can adapt according to the needs of your students. So here you go with the example of snowball writing example. Then the next one is sketch and scribble writing. Have students form a group of three, each give each of the students a picture as a writing prompt. Then the picture prompts below are the ones I use. The images should allow them to use a narrative voice to describe a scene. They should keep the prompt hidden from the other members of the group. So here are different stories that these are the images that I talked about earlier. These are sketch and scribble writing examples. Tapestry poetry. If you're teaching your students poetry, so you can ask them, you can use this technique, select a title for the poem, and the student who selects the title is the only one who has the option of using it in the poem to avoid repetition. Both students write a 9 lines, so 18 must be included. So there you go with the tapestry poetry example. And then gratification writing, where students set up 4 chart papers stations around the room with the following titles: conflict, character traits, settings, and theme. Break the class into 4 groups and have students have each other group go to the next station. The group members of the work together to graffiti the page with potential conflicts, character traits, setting, and theme that could emerge in a fictional story. Have students group spend 3 to 4 minutes filling the correct chart paper up with their ideas, then have them all circulate to the next station to repeat the process. When they're done, have each student select 1 character traits, conflict, setting, and theme, and gratified pages to develop a unique narrative. And this is how there's an example of gratification writing. Shared sensory writing, put students into a group of 3, give them an object to describe, and as a group they decide which of the 3 senses they will focus on: sight, smell, taste, hearing, and touching. Each person is assigned a sense. They write a short paragraph describing the object based on their sense they receive. The group combines elements from each of the paragraph to create a final descriptive piece. There you go with the example. There you go with the references that I use while drafting my presentation. So
thank you so much, Adeel, for presenting such a wonderful webinar presentation. I hope audience will learn more about this enhancement of collaboration writing development and will share their valuable feedback after watching this webinar. So if you have comments, questions, and or suggestions, please write to us on open@evolution.com.pk. Till then, happy teaching and learning.